Hi, this is Mac with MacSair29 and just hanging out on a Saturday morning. Thought I'd just go over something on my MT4 G3. I'm not going to take anything apart very much, just wanted to show what I was going to talk about, and that is the motor. So everyone knows it has this Ripper 2000 kV motor. So about a month ago I finally destroyed the stock bearing in the front, and so I took it apart, took the front end bell off, which is the plate on the front of the motor, and the whole inside of the bearing was just shot. Just the outer ring was left. I got it out, and it's a 5mm by 16mm by 5mm bearing, and I don't know, it's stock. I don't think it was ceramic. I think it was just a steel bearing. It was destroyed, so I couldn't really see what it was. And also use the same bearing on the rear of the motor. So I started to do some research to try to find that bearing, and I found that that's the same size bearing that Tiger uses on the T8 and that the Mama Monster uses. And so it sounds like to me it's a pretty common 8-scale bearing. But obviously, or apparently, the hobby stores I go to, I never heard of that size, so maybe people don't buy bearings from there. I don't know. So every time I asked a hobby store about that size bearing, they gave me a confused look, like they didn't know what I was talking about. So I was a little annoyed with that. So anyway, I go on Tower Hobbies, I find this that size bearing. Acer makes one, and I'll put up a link to that. And it's like $9, and it's ceramic. It's a steel structure, but ceramic balls inside. And then Avid RC is a company I buy our bearings from. They also make one with ceramic balls in it. It's like I forgot to I'll put a link up to that too. I'm trying to remember. I think it was like $15 if you include shipping or something like that. Or I'll put a link up about that. Anyway, I like their bearings. They sell a lot of the other bearings for like the wheels and stuff for like $1. But I don't want to pay like 15 bucks just to have something shipped that costs half of that. If I could just order it through Tower for like a $9 Acer's bearing. And then, so I looked up and Tiger sells one. For like $19. But they give you another bearing for their in one, which is like a 5x11x5. And I already have enough of those for another motor. I have a Novak motor that uses that same bearing. I think Valenian Traxxas motor uses that bearing, and I only have the Novak motor right now that uses it. So I don't want to buy another spare bearing, which I already have enough of. So my hobby store could order through Tower or Great Plains and Horizon. So I gave them the part number, and some reason Tower or Great Plains won't release that bearing to the hobby store. So they told me they couldn't get it. So I was like, okay, great. So I called up the other hobby store. It's a guy who runs a track in a hobby store in town. Asked him if he had a bearing for that, and he said, yeah, he has a really cheap one. He doesn't recommend to use it in an electric brushless motor. So I kept looking around trying to find a fairly decent price bearing, something that I can get more of if I wanted. So I found a website called VBX. I'll put a link up to it. And they sell all kinds of bearings. They're kind of like a Boca bearing, whatever, but they sell like industrial bearings and everything. So anyway, I found one there. It's a 625Z, and it's just a steel structured bearing with steel balls inside. It was 99 cents. I'm like, man, I don't know if that's going to be a good enough bearing for what I'm going to do. Maybe what if it gets destroyed? So doing some research back and forth, even trying to call some local places in town or where I live that might sell some bearings like that. I can just buy them locally. Had just no luck. So anyway, I went on Tower and I was just looking at the picture of the Tiger bearing, And on it, stamped on the bearing, on the picture Tower shows, it says Indonesia 625Z. And I'll post a picture of that. So I open up the page on VBX, and other than the Indonesia, it's a 625Z. It's an identical bearing. Tiken's charging $20 with the included rear bearing, and VBX is charging $99 cents, and then it's like $5 for shipping. So I'm like, I could buy 5 of their bearings with shipping's $10 for the price. I could order 1 of these other bearings. So then I got curious. I thought, if this other guy in town, this Track with the hobby store in it, sells a cheap bearing according to him, I wonder what his is. So I drove over there, and it's that stinking 625Z bearing that he said was too cheap to put in a motor. So I was like, well, this is the same bearing that Tiken's selling for their OEM replacement. So I bought his. It fits right in. Now, granted, I've only run a couple packs through it. But so anyway, I'm going to try this bearing out. I figure if it is the same bearing that Tiken uses, if it's good enough for Tiken, it should be good enough for me, right? The stock bearing lasted a year. If this bearing lasted even 6 months, he charged $2, which is still cheap for a 99-cent bearing, which is totally fair. They last me 6 months. It's totally worth it. I'd rather go to his hobby store and buy 5 of them and always have spares. And they're not that hard to replace, as long as I can get it out without it expanding too much and getting all in there. But now I know how to get them out. I know where I can get them for cheap. And I'll put a link where you can buy them from that VBX. You know, like I said, if you bought like 5 of them with like $5.99 shipping, it's like $11 for 5 of them, which is not bad. And so anyway, I just wanted to share some of the research I've done about the bearing in this truck. Now, I'm sure if you went with the Acer one with the ceramic balls, I know that they're more efficient and it's probably a better bearing. I don't know, but I figure for a basher truck with this motor, it doesn't need to have the best, in my opinion. It just needs to have something that'll work. Especially with how dirty I run it. I hate to put some nice fancy ceramic bearing, ball bearing in this front and just have it get dirty and gummed up and have to do high maintenance on it because it's ceramic. Anyway, I'm not a bearing expert. I don't know what would be the best. That was the trouble I was having. I don't know like what the tolerances is necessary to be in an electric motor, and I don't really care about all that as much. I started doing research on ABEC ratings and the tolerances and stuff, and I figured, you know what, I'm just gonna try something out that's cheap, and if it works, if it lasts me even 4 to 6 months, I'm happy. I can buy cheap replacements, it's easy to fix, and then I'll keep, so it's like the middle of August, and the end of the year, I'll share what happened with this bearing, and then maybe other people now will have some more resources to draw from when they decide to get a bearing for their MT4 or EV4 or whatever equivalent. I think this is the same motor that's like the Tacon or Leopard rebadge. It probably uses the same bearing too. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this is helpful to you. Have a good day.